Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of 2024 news to get into this morning. We've got a war over wokeness in the Republican primary that nobody sort of expected between Trump and DeSantis. We'll tell you about that. We've also got the debate over the debates, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side. And RFK Jr. gets a big and very prominent endorsement. YouTube is actually changing their misinformation policy with regard to election misinformation. We also have a big decision from the Supreme Court that could hurt workers and their right to strike. So we'll break down all of those details for you. In addition, I know this is going to be huge news for our viewing audience. Chuck Todd out at Meet the Press. Kristen Welker is going to be the host of that long running Sunday show. So we'll tell you about that and what the plans are there. Also excited about a guest on just how much military industrial complex money is going to all of the analysts that you're hearing on the Ukraine war. You perhaps won't be surprised, but still important to dig into all of those details. But before we get to that, Sagar, why are we not in our normal studio?
Yes, we're not in our normal studio because it doesn't exist anymore. We are
That's
currently
true.
at home. The studio is being ripped apart, renovated, being completely reborn into a brand new iteration of which I think everyone will be very excited. It's the very last week. You all have to hear us talk about how nice it is. You can judge it for all of yourselves. I want to say thank you to all the premium members who are making it possible, who are signing up. And just to make it clear, we are going to have a very, very special announcement. Our premium subscribers will have the first look at the set substantially before anybody else, and it debuts next week. So if you want to see the set firsthand, and if you really want to help pay for it, because it was the biggest expense in the history of Breaking Points, it's breakingpoints.com where you can help us out.
Yes. So the old set has gone into a cocoon and it will emerge
Yes.
next week as a beautiful butterfly. We're
That's
very
right.
excited.
That's exactly right. We still have got a great show though for everybody. We're going to make sure that we have all of the normal content that you are used to. So let's start here with the woke war of words. President Trump actually kind of surprising people in the campaign whenever he came out and attacked DeSantis apparently for always using the term woke in his campaign. Here's what Trump had to say.
It's gone sick. And I don't like the term woke because I hear woke, woke, woke. It's like just a term that use half the people can't even define it. They don't know what it is.
Ooh, a little bit of a Bethany Bandel moment there, or going for President Trump. Says half the people can't even define it. I don't like hearing it over and over again. It's interesting always to me because Trump always hones in on something which is someone's political vulnerability, but which other Republicans refuse to say. That said, DeSantis also had his response. So, Crystal, we'll talk about the fulsome nature of this woke war of words after we hear it. Let's take a listen to what DeSantis said.
Woke is an existential threat to our society. I mean, it's an attack on truth. It's a form of cultural Marxism, and it really subordinates merit and achievement to things like identity politics. You can't have a vibrant free society if every institution is dominated by woke ideology. And to say it's not a big deal, that just shows, you don't understand what a lot of these issues are right now.
DeSantis, woke is an existential threat to the country. You shouldn't be running if you don't understand it. It shows a mismatch in judgment. Trump saying woke, woke, woke. Nobody can even define it. What did you make of all of this?
I mean, it's interesting to me. I'm always a little bit leery of offering my assessment of exactly what the Republican
Right.
base might think about this because I'm not a part of the Republican base. But it seems likely to me that this reflects a bit of the class split between the DeSantis and Trump base. So, Trump is very much and always has been sort of attuned to what a working class GOP aligned or GOP interested or more like sort of working class independent base, what they might be feeling. DeSantis has already proven that he has much stronger support among the college educated portion of the Republican base. So I don't know. My instinct is that Trump kind of has his finger on the pulse of the way people are starting to feel about this word, which is so wildly overused. Which, originally I think there was a usefulness to talking about a pushback to the, political correctness and the cancel culture and the authoritarian tendencies of liberals and left liberals. But now when you're talking about like the problem with the military is that it's woke, the problem with bank bailouts are that they're woke, the thing just loses all meaning and collapses into, nothingness. And I think a lot of people in the country are probably attuned to that, including a lot of people in the Republican base who are like, this doesn't really connect to me in my life and the things that I'm actually concerned about in terms of putting food on the table.
I'm of two minds. So on one hand, I actually saw a recent poll which said that the number one issue for Republican voters is going after what they see as, and they didn't use the term woke in the poll, but they basically just said cultural left tendencies, specifically by corporations and through the broader culture. So that's one thing. But at the same time, Trump, I think one of his geniuses, what you're identifying is you're right, which is that the most activist part of the Republican base, whenever it comes to wokeness, corporations, and all of that, it really is more of a highly educated, more of a conservative, who went to college, which again, it's not actually very typical for not only the median voter in the United States, but even for the person who is in the GOP primary. So they might identify and see it as something else. And I think it gets to what Trump's attack on DeSantis is, where he's always trying to go after him for saying that he's empty, that he's a lightweight. And that is where it is connecting. I'm genuinely don't know how it will land because at the same time, like we said, it is a word almost drummed into the political consciousness at this point of every American, class status or not. And I do think it is also interesting from a different angle, which is whenever you think about Trump and his political genius, what he's able to connect to, he does not necessarily go after wokeness. He always goes after discrete issues. And
Mhm.
actually, that's kind of what we always try to do here. We very rarely use the term woke. I may use it, every once in a while, but more than often or not, like affirmative action. We're not describing that as woke. We're just like affirmative action is bad. And then like we'll go through the exact discrete nature. If you want to talk about the military, I mean, whenever people say the military is woke, it's like, well, what are you objecting to? You're objecting to General Milley, citing critical race theory before Congress and then diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So once again, attack things that are discrete and trying to think of some all-encompassing term that becomes meaningless because then you end up just in the situation that you described, Krystal, where bailing out SVB is woke. It could just be bad. Like we
Right.
could just say things are bad and you could talk about things from that nature.
Right. But I mean, I've always felt this and I've articulated this on the show a number of times. Like the use of wokeness to describe things that conservatives like Ron DeSantis don't like. We saw this, the first time we really got a sort of clear example of this is when Marco Rubio said, hey, you know what? I'm going to support the Amazon
Yes.
workers down in Bessemer, not because we need a general pushback against corporate power, not because in general, I think workers should have a union so that they have some power within their workplace, but because of the discrete woke HR policies that happen to exist at Amazon. So it's a way to be very selective about your critique of corporate power without actually really challenging corporate power or the structures that enables it. So it's been very convenient, but it also speaks to, DeSantis in his launch, even putting the tech glitches aside and all of that stuff. The language that he has adopted and that he uses in his media appearances, that he even uses in his stump speech, is so online and so inaccessible. It's the polar opposite of the way that Trump speaks. I remember when he first ran in 2016, there were all these analyses that were supposed to be damning to Trump about how he speaks at like a third grade or a fourth
Right.
grade level or whatever. But actually, he's an effective communicator, maybe an unconventional communicator, but a very effective communicator because he boils things down, he makes them simple, and he uses language that is very accessible to absolutely everyone. DeSantis is on the polar end of that spectrum. So, it's not like Trump and DeSantis are really different from a policy level on the basket of issues you may consider woke. In fact, I think that very same day, Trump was also talking about the woke military or whatever.
Mhm.
But their communication styles are obviously wildly different. The issue set that they choose to spend the most of their time on, that are sort of their clear passion projects, are also very different. We noted, Saagar, that in Trump's announcement speech, I don't know, if he mentioned transgender issues at all, it was very scarce. Abortion wasn't there at all. So the set of issues that Trump leans into and clearly has an actual interest and passion for, very different from the set of issues that Ron
Yeah.
DeSantis has used to become a national figure within the conservative party.
Smart. I completely agree. They're also sparring on the vaccine. This was a fascinating one actually to watch because Trump has been hearing some pushback from even people who are attending his rallies on the vaccine. And it's leading to a war of words about who supported the vaccine, but then didn't support the vaccine, and then was pro mandate, and then relitigating also whether the Trump lockdown strategy was his fault or Fauci's fault. And this has actually become a major core contention between DeSantis and between Trump, is specifically their records on COVID. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen because this kind of gets to it and why I think it is going to be difficult for him overall. There was no bump currently for DeSantis from the 2024 launch as Trump continues to climb, even though DeSantis, as I have noted here, has continued his attacks on Trump, specifically on the vaccine. He has, and I've given him credit here for it, has, very taken up an aggressive posture where he's calling out Trump by name, responding to the attacks, and trying to make himself become the formidable and only challenger to Trump, willing to actually rhetorically spar with him. But on the vaccine itself, this shows you a little bit about why it's going to be so difficult for him. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen, guys, from CNN. This is from Andrew Kaczynski, where he shows, Ron DeSantis actually praised Anthony Fauci for COVID response in spring of 2020 for, quote, really doing a good job. Now, I'm not saying this is a hit piece on DeSantis. There's no question that he obviously departed from that. What I am saying and trying to show people here is that trying to relitigate a moment in time 3 years ago is going to be very difficult and dicey, especially because all Trump has to say, Krystal, is he praised my response at the time. He departed from it a little bit later on, but also he, was kissing my ass in these endorsement videos, defending me on television. There really was no split between the two until basically after Trump had gone ahead and left the White House. And so that is why I've always believed that DeSantis's best line is the one he actually used recently. He said, they were asking about, how do you pronounce my name? Is it DeSantis or DeSantis? He said, the way that you just say it is winner. I'm the winner. I'm the one who has actually won recently in this race. It's a forward looking and it's a more positive one that not only primary voters could connect to, but people across the country could connect to. But then you run into the Gordian knot of Trump, who Republicans don't believe actually lost at all. They do think he is a winner. Maybe DeSantis is
Yeah.
just a bigger winner. So yeah, look,
It's funny.
it's a hard situation.
It's funny to me you liked that line that DeSantis,
I
it's not
liked it.
DeSantis or
Yeah.
DeSantis, it's winner. I thought it was really terrible.
Really? I'm surprised.
I thought it was so cringy. But anyway, again, I'm not the audience for it. So um listen, on the COVID stuff, I think DeSantis really thought this was going to be his in and his avenue of attack on Trump. He thought this would be the way that he could separate himself. And, it was a year ago, a major energizing issue for the Republican base. And I think he's having trouble letting that go, even though people have moved on. Like, it's just not the energizing issue for anyone that it was at one time. So yeah, they can go back and forth this war of words. Honestly, I think it's kind of like wasted time for both of them at this point. I think the other thing is, Trump just gets away with stuff that other politicians can't get away with. So if another politician had kept Anthony Fauci on, that might be devastating for them. Somehow Trump just gets away with these things. So personally, I don't think that this is going to be, the winning issue that Ron DeSantis wants it to be. Also, because Trump is able, this is what he's so good at. He muddies the waters. He'll be using the video of DeSantis praising him over and over again and kissing his butt. That's one way to muddy the waters. Another way is to point out these areas where, DeSantis agreed with like the COVID conventional wisdom of the time. So I think ultimately this issue is probably a wash for both of them, and not the ground that the GOP primary is going to be fought on.
Trump also, displayed his, skill, I guess, in this. He's like, look, I never supported the mandates, but I created the vaccine and it was great. And, actually correctly noting that over 75% of Americans did actually receive at least one dose
Yeah.
of the vaccine.
Well, I
do you want
actually
to say before we play
yeah.
the clip? Yeah.
Yeah. So on that, the other, as you're pointing to, the big argument in favor of Ron DeSantis that his donors really point to and respond to is that he's electable. He's more electable than Trump. And, he may be in the right place with regard to vaccines and sort of like hinting at vaccine skepticism or anti-vaxxism within the Republican primary. It's not a popular position to be in for a general election. As you're pointing out, overwhelming majority of Americans got a vaccine, and overwhelming majority of them were happy with that decision and feel like the vaccines did something. It wasn't everything that was promised, but help reduce the risk that they would be severely ill or hospitalized or dead from COVID. So this is another issue where I feel like, Trump can get away with the more moderate position in the primary, and it actually gives him a stronger case that he's the more electable candidate in the fall, and a stronger reality that he may be a more electable candidate in the fall.
Well, here's what he had to say. Judge for yourself.
Everybody wanted a vaccine at that time. And I was able to do something that nobody else could have done, getting it done very, very rapidly. But I never was for mandates. I thought the mandates were terrible. And there's a big portion of the country that thinks that was a great thing. You understand that. Not a lot of the people in this room, but there is a big portion.
Well, he's explaining it. And, I've always actually thought that, especially even amongst Republican voters, people 65 plus were overwhelmingly likely to get the vaccine. So, it's one of those where I genuinely don't know. I personally am not inclined to believe, based upon all the polling that currently exists, that COVID is going to be the number one issue in the primary. People are always generally forward looking whenever it does come to elections.
True.
And especially whenever it comes to switching candidates, they always want to see a contrast about the future. Yes, of course, the future is determined by what people have done in the past, but that's why I continue to think that DeSantis's best option is leaning into being a winner, the economic boom of Florida, the net in migration, turning America into all of that. Now, whether he was cringy on the winner line or not, I mean, I think what I'm baking in is I just don't think he's all that politically talented as a speaker. And
Mhm.
Trump is. Trump is compelling. And, and this is one of those it factor things of which we can go on back and forth all the time. And the country, goes back and forth between whether they want somebody like Obama, the ultimate eloquent speaker, and then somebody like George W. Bush who could barely string a sentence together. So it's one of those where
Yeah.
I just never know what mood the overall electorate is in. Do they want somebody who's kind of whiny, not all that politically talented, but can speak cogently in a sentence, or do they want to see the show whenever it comes to Trump?
I mean, Bush famously even had the relatability, even though he's this totally unrelatable plutocrat, born into a
Right.
political dynasty family, he had that you want to drink a beer with him vibe. Like that was always the famous thing about him that people responded to. Biden, for, all of his agedness and feebleness at that point, I mean, he has a little bit of that as well, where people felt like, this is somebody that I sort of relate to. And, he was always good at sharing empathy with people when they were going through very difficult times. I think the part of the problem for him is he's lost a little bit of that now. People are seeing less of that in
Yeah.
him, but that's kind of the core of his appeal. So yeah, I don't know that DeSantis has either the eloquence of Obama or Bill Clinton either, or the really compelling speaking style of like a Trump or a George W. Bush, who was also to sort of boil things down and make them relatable. I also, just to go back for a minute to the piece we put up about how he didn't get a poll bump from his launch, it's kind of devastating. I mean, he really needed that,
Problem.
it's a big problem. And whether that's because of the tech glitches or the content of the launch or the way the media, whatever, it's a huge missed opportunity for him. Even Nikki Haley got a bump from her launch and, did a very conventional rollout. Sometimes there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And, maybe it doesn't matter because a lot of times those initial launch bumps fade anyway. But that was really the moment when he needed to prove, like, okay, now that I'm in the race, things are going to be different. And he wasn't able to pull that off. And I think it shows some weaknesses in terms of the type of judgment that he makes and the part of the GOP base that he's super responsive to, that's not necessarily reflective of the larger GOP base. So there are to me, some real warning signs in the fact that launch went so poorly that he didn't get any kind of benefit from the polls and from having all of the media. There's not going to be that many times for Ron DeSantis when all of the media is focused on him, just given the show that Trump creates and the looming indictments and all of that stuff. So when you have those moments, you really can't afford to squander them, and he definitely did. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.